right, so good afternoon, good morning, everybody. Welcome in from across the continent. My name is Jesse, and I am your virtual adventure guide here with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. Now, I know we've got a lot of familiar faces in our audience today, but if you are new to what we do, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world. And it has been so exciting having you in for the last month and a bit, as we've done over 70 programs featuring scientists and explorers and amazing people and places around the globe. So pat yourselves on the back, give yourselves a round of applause, bit of both at the same time. It's so nice to have you join us today. Now today, we've got a very special series continuing on, something that we did last year to great fanfare, and that is our Peak Discovery series in conjunction with the amazing team at Parks Canada's mountain parks in Alberta and British Columbia. These are some of the most special, scenic, and amazing places on this planet. Never mind just Canada. The whole world. Jasper, Banff, Coho, Kootenay, Yoho, and Kootenay. Say that 5 times fast. Just incredible places. And we are kicking off today with Marian, our favorite educator at the Peak Discovery series. And she's going to walk us through her new office mates, who turned out to be a little bit different than she thought they might be. They are bats. You guys came in huge numbers today. This is our most registered for program of the entire year so far. So you guys love bats as much as I do and as much as Marian does. And together we're going to learn a lot about these incredible creatures from her in just a second. So if you're joining us on YouTube, let us know where you're joining from. Say hello in the chat. Live classes, thank you so much for being here. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Marian to blow our minds. Marian, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks, Jesse. I'm so excited to be here. I'm so happy to be back again with the Parks Canada Mountain Parks Peak Discovery series, and so happy to see you again. It's always a pleasure to be here with you and with our audience from all over Canada and all sorts of places in the United States as well. So it's great to be back.
It's great to have you back. Well, if you want to dive in and walk us through some stuff, I'm excited to get underway. While you're doing that too, I'll note we've got people in Addison, Ontario, Kamloops, Ottawa, Calgary, Alberta, Chatham in our chat. So please do keep telling us where you guys are joining from, and we will get underway with Marian's presentation. Thank you so much, Marian.
You're very welcome. So again, thank you for the introduction. My name, yes, is Marian, and I'm a public outreach and education officer with Parks Canada here in Jasper National Park. Now, as you mentioned, Jesse, Jasper is in the Rocky Mountains in Western Alberta, and it is also in Treaty 6 and 8 territory, as well as the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Assiniboine, the Denizah, Nahiwaks, Secwepemc, Stoney Nakoda, and Métis. We acknowledge the past, present, and future generations of these nations who continue to steward the land. Jasper is one of several mountain parks that is participating in the Mountain Parks Peak Discovery series, and it is so cool to be the first to bring some of the stories of the mountain parks to our audiences, who, as you were saying, are from all over the place. So to give our friends from all over a little bit more of an idea of where Jasper is and where the mountain parks are, I'll just bring up the map of Canada right here. So we have the map of Canada as well as the National Park System. And the mountain parks are right here in this little circle right here on the western side in Alberta and British Columbia, in the Rocky Mountains, as well as the Columbia Ranges too. Now Jasper itself is right here, the northernmost of the parks. And to give you an even closer look, right here is actually where I'm presenting to you from the Palisades Stewardship Education Center. So part of my job as an educator, as an outreach officer, is to tell the stories of the park, to tell the stories of the plants and the animals and the history and all of that to you, our listeners, and to our visitors that come from all over, especially to see some of the cool wildlife like the bighorn sheep, the mountain goats, the grizzly bears, and all sorts of other fantastic creatures. And of course, one of my favorites, the bats. Bats are incredible animals. Does anyone know how many bat species are in the world? I'll give you a chance to think about it, maybe share with a partner, share in the chat if you have any guesses.
Yeah, we can give people a quick second on this. We've got a lot of classes in the chat. StreamYard, if you guys want to put your things in the chat as well. How many types of bats do you think there are in the world? This is a tricky one. This is one of my favorite mammal facts, or facts about animal groups. Anyone wants to chime in? So far, nothing, Marian. Maybe we've shocked them with sheer excitement about how many bats are going to be. Oh, we now get into private chat. Let's see, 4,000, over 100, 200, 3,000, 1,300. Now they're like just pouring in all the options. What is our over 1,000 from our Calgary crew? What is it, Marian?
Over 1,000. There are approximately 1,400 different species of bats worldwide. They live on every continent except for Antarctica. You might even have bats in your backyard, because there are also in Canada 18 different species, and in Alberta 9 different kinds of bats, which is so cool. Now, you mentioned before my new office mates. There are actually 2 different kinds of bats that roost during the summer at the Palisades Center in the attic of one of the buildings. Now, for some people, and I have to admit, maybe myself at the beginning, that could be a little uncomfortable. Bats are strange. We don't necessarily know a lot about them, although scientists are doing all sorts of research to find out more about these species. And I might have a little clip to show you my reaction when I found out that there are 2 different types of bats living in one of the buildings here.
What was that? It was coming from above me. I better ask my supervisor. Bats?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a shock. I had heard all sorts of stories about bats, and it turns out not a lot of the stories are necessarily true. So I heard that bats drink blood, that bats are blind, they can get caught up in your hair. Well, it turns out that there are some species of bats that do drink blood, but out of all of those 1,400 species, only 3 of those are vampire bats, and none of those live in Canada. In fact, 2 out of those 3 species of vampire bats, they much prefer to drink the blood from birds, not mammals. So my fears for that, a little bit exaggerated. And as for being blind, turns out bats totally can see, but a lot of them use different senses for traveling around at night because they're nocturnal. They're echolocators, so they use sound to hunt for their prey and to navigate when it's dark outside. How do I know all this? Well, with a little help of my new friends upstairs, sharing my office space with some people, well, some bats that are truly experts on being a bat, and a little bit of research, I started my journey of learning a little bit more about the bats. So why don't I show you?
I decided to do what I do best. Read about it. But then I was given another idea. That's a good thought. Why don't I try to step into the wings of a bat? The first thing to do is to look for a place to roost as a bat. I don't know. It looks like the branches here are a little small. Maybe up inside this picnic shelter. Bats do like to roost inside buildings sometimes, or under shingles. Anywhere that gives them a little bit of shelter. That didn't seem to work either. A little bit too tall for me. While I'm looking for a place for me to roost, I'm not the only one looking for a good place for bats to sleep. Scientists at Parks Canada actually look for places that bats like to hibernate or like to roost during the day, to understand more about the bats and what kind of bat species live in the national parks. Bats like to roost upside down. Their feet are facing a different way from ours, so it's a lot easier for them to cling on. So if I could just get... Well, it's easy for you to say. You're actually a bat. I can feel all the blood rushing to my head. Maybe this wasn't such a great idea after all. I should probably try something else. Okay, plan B. I know at the Palisades Center there are bat boxes too. So bats like to roost in trees or in buildings, in caves or mines, but people can also provide bat homes. Bat boxes are a good way to keep bats around, even if you don't want them inside your buildings. Now, if I could just... Nope. Well, let's try it again, maybe with my wing. Reach one more time. Nope. Ugh. Oh, dear. I guess a bat box isn't going to fit a human. Time to get a snack. Now, bats don't usually go to the kitchen for a snack. They hunt their food, and they do it at night because they're nocturnal. I thought I'd see what there would be available for me, since I'm not actually a bat and everything. Probably go for the next best thing. Mmm, delicious. Like my bat friend says, bats actually in Canada eat insects. They're insectivores. They're also the only mammal that can truly fly. But I thought I'd give it my best shot. Put the goggles on for safety, and here we go. You didn't have to make a comment on my form like that, Miss Squeaky. You know, I'm doing my best. It's not easy for a human to try and fly like a bat. I think I'd better try another strategy. Because most bats do actually need to drop before they can fly. Maybe if I jump off this stump, I can get just enough momentum. And I landed. Well, it was worth a shot. I guess humans just aren't really good flyers. Except with a little help. Turns out bats have really neat wings. They're called handwing chiroptera. Look at those little bones in there. Those are their fingers. It takes a lot of energy to flap around like a bat. Oh my goodness. After all that flying, I thought it was a good idea to cuddle up with my little bat buddies and take a nice long nap. It takes a lot of energy being a bat. Good thing for a lot of the bats that live in Canada that they get to spend the winter sleeping. That's right, they hibernate. They cuddle up together in big snuggle piles of bats, mostly in caves or old mines, and they spend the winter snoozing away. One problem about this, though, is that they're not the only thing in there sometimes. There's a fungus that causes a disease called white nose syndrome that grows on the faces and wings of bats, and it wakes them up during hibernation. It was discovered in New York in 2006 and has spread across the continent since then. It's devastating for the bats because they're not able to find food to survive the winter. 90% don't survive. This is the reason why 3 species of bats, the little brown bat, the northern bat, and the tricolored bat, are declared a species at risk. I thought I'd ask my friend to tell me a little bit about the projects that Parks Canada is taking on to help the bats. So I'm here with one of our park biologists, Nina, and she knows a lot about bats. And since I'm trying to learn more, I thought I would ask her some questions. So I know that bats in Canada are threatened by a disease called white nose syndrome. And I was just wondering if there's anything in Jasper that we're doing to sort of keep track of the situation or to protect the bats.
That's such a good question. So yeah, white nose is the primary concern for bats in Alberta and in Canada in general. In Jasper specifically, we're doing a lot of monitoring. So we want to know what species live in the park, how are they distributed? So like where can we find them? And we're trying to locate hibernacula within the park to see where bats are hibernating. In addition, we're doing a lot of protection. So basically any cave in the park is closed for recreational purposes. You can get a permit if you're a scientist, if you need to do some research, but if you see a cave in the park, please do not go in, just in case there are bats in there that we're trying to protect.
And how do you find out what bats are here and where they are?
That's also a really good question. So mostly we do a lot of acoustic monitoring because just it's nighttime. Bats are small, they're quick, but they do emit echolocation calls. So we set up bat recorders throughout the park to see what species we can hear. And based on the way they echolocate, we can get an idea of what species that we can find. Oh, got a trigger. There must be a bat. Oh yeah, there's one.
Hi, Nina.
Hey, MJ.
It worked.
It does. Yeah, it's triggering like crazy. Must be echolocating. So we set up a bat detector in an area where we know we'll find bats. So something like a marsh where there's lots of insects, so lots of food for bats. We'll set this up on a pole. We'll attach the microphone 5 meters up, way up in the air. Just that's where the bats will be flying around unobstructed. There's no vegetation in the way, so they'll be able to find their insects more easily. And this is always listening, but it only records when it hears a bat, something high frequency, and that's when we'll be able to see what kind of bats are hunting insects in our locations. We also do acoustic transects using a car with an attached microphone. So we drive around the park and we record these echolocation calls, which we can later analyze in the lab.
That's really cool. And I've heard sometimes it's kind of hard to tell the difference between different species when they call.
Yes, that's very true. A lot of species kind of echolocate in the same frequency, so we can maybe say what generally this bat is. So we have another project that's going on in the park to try to nail down what species we have, and it's our Bats and Bridges project. We have a collaborator who visits bridges where bats like to roost during the nighttime, and he collects guano. So he collects bat poop and then sends it off to a lab that does a DNA analysis to see what species we have.
So as a non-scientist, is there anything that I can do to help the bats or help the people who are helping the bats?
I think the most important thing you can do is let someone in the park or someone like a fish and wildlife officer know if you do see a bat, especially if you see a bat in distress. Don't touch it, but it helps us with our monitoring work. Having people like you and people like you watching report any bat sightings to us really helps us get an idea of where the bats are found within the province.
That's so cool. Thank you so much for showing me all of this, all of the things that scientists are doing to look for and listen for the bats.
Anytime, come again.
Will do.
So I've since found out that there are other projects too that Parks Canada is participating in Rouge Urban National Park in Toronto. They're building bat condos to provide housing for bats. In Prince Edward Island, there was a maternity roost, a maternity colony found in a building that was near the park but slated for destruction. So Parks Canada talked to the owners and was able to work with them to actually relocate the building across the park boundary to allow the bats to continue using that building for the maternity roost. And a few bat boxes were constructed as well. These two and so many other stories can be found on the Parks Canada website about the monitoring and protection that's happening all throughout the mountain parks as well, in Banff, in Yoho, Kootenay, and Waterton Lakes with the study that they did after the Kenow wildfire in 2017, looking for and locating the bats, and with radio monitors and mist netting, and so much more is happening. White nose syndrome is still obviously a big threat. It has not made its way to Alberta yet, but it is a matter of time. So a lot of what the parks in Alberta and British Columbia as well are doing is to prepare for the things that we can do to help the bats once that comes over our boundaries as well. So I'd like to thank you all so much for coming and listening to me today about the bats. I would encourage you to share your new knowledge and share any stories you have about bats with your fans, with your friends and family, because knowledge is a big part. As you can see, the more I learn about bats, the more I love them. Yep. So thank you again. And I'm so glad you came to join me today.
Absolutely. Marian, what a spectacular presentation, and your willingness to don the bat costume. It's really my dream for Halloween. If you want to ship it to us in Newfoundland anytime in the future, I'd be very excited about that.
You mean this bat costume?
So yes, students, we're going to dive into the Q&A now. So any queries you have about bats as Marian doffs her perfect outfit, please feel free to share. YouTube group, share in the chat. And we're going to go to all our live classes over the next few minutes to keep the excitement going. For any groups that have their mics muted, unmute those mics. I promise I can't hear you till I want you to, but we're going to head to Miss Megan's class first for a question. If you guys want to come on in, unmute your mic and take us away. Welcome in, grade 2s. Hi, guys. Hello.
Hi. Hi.
Do you have any bat questions for Marian?
Hold on, Carmela's going to go. You're standing.
Why do bats, they have like on their like arms,
Yep.
like their like arm things, when their hands, it's like on their hands. It looks like when you skin something, it looks like they're like arms, or it's all clear. It's like when you skin like a deer, it's like all the like fattening.
Yeah.
So I think it's, why is their skin so thin?
Yes.
Oh, that's a really good question. That's their wings. So that membrane is really delicate and thin to be able to catch the air currents and be able to fly properly. And this is kind of what it looks on the inside.
Cool.
So this isn't life size for any of the bats in Canada, but it does give you an idea of how much bats' wings actually look like human hands, just with really long fingers. The thumb and 4 fingers.
Marian, is that a flying fox arm? Like, is that from one of the Australian or Indonesian bats, the monsters?
Yes, it is a replica of a fruit bat wing.
So, yes, in some parts of the world, we have fairly small bats, all things considered, here in Canada, but the biggest bats in the world can have 6-foot wingspans, which is about as wide as Marian and I's arms are wide, which is just fantastic. Notre Dame Academy, Louisville, Kentucky. If you guys want to come on in, you're good to go. Hello. Hi, second graders. Yeah, hi.
Hi. Okay, Marian.
Since bats use sound to see in the dark, can they see with their eyes?
Ooh, good question.
That is a good question. Yes, they can. Bats have pretty good eyesight, and they can see with their eyes as well as using echolocation to find their way around.
I really like this question, and I want to turn it back to students. If you close your eyes, so we're a very visual species, people. We really rely on sight. But if you close your eyes and just listen, you can make out a little bit of the shape of the room you're in. You can hear where people might be, other sounds in the environment. So people that don't have the power of sight can often find their way quite well using that power of sound. So it's reversed. Bats have better hearing than they do sight, but they still are perfectly capable of seeing. Great question, guys. Mr. Boggs' class, if you guys want to unmute your mic, I'll come to you guys in just a second, but we'll head to our Eagleswood 4th graders joining us in New Jersey today. If you guys want to come on in, you are good to go. Hey, guys.
All right, go ahead, Addison.
What is the most common type of bat?
Ooh, good question.
That's a good question. So in Canada, at least until white nose syndrome started devastating their populations, the little brown bat was one of the most common types of bats found in Canada. And I actually have here a little brown bat skull. Well, it's not a real one, but it's a replica. So you can actually see how tiny they are.
Fantastic. I've seen little brown bats. That's actually the only species I've seen up close in Canada ever. They're really quite delightful creatures. So thank you for that, Marian. A quick note for our StreamYard classes. Queen Street crew, if you want to type in the chat, I know your devices are having a little bit of trouble today. Please feel free to do that. Mr. Boggs, I will come to you guys when you unmute your mic, but let's head to our Stafford Springs, Connecticut crew, Miss Bergeron and Miss Erickson's group. Come on in, guys. Unmute and take us away. Hey.
Go ahead, Serena.
So how old can bats like live?
Yeah. How long can bats live, Marian?
Oh, that is a good question, and it's one of my favorite bat facts. So mammals of their size, bats, roughly around the same size as mice. The average lifespan for other mammals of that size is quite short. Like for mice, it's about 1.5 years, 2 years in the wild. For the little brown bat, it's about 10 years, but they've actually discovered little brown bats and other bats that live as long as about 30 years. So they're an incredibly long-lived species.
Crazy. What a great question, guys. Mr. Boggs' group, our Kitchener crew in Ontario. If you guys want to come on in, grade 6s, you're good to go. Hey.
Hey, thanks so much. We have a question here. Go ahead. Go ahead.
How can bats survive if they carry diseases?
So that's a good question. And for the bats that are affected by white nose in particular, unfortunately, because the disease itself, or the fungus, scientists believe it came over from Europe, the bats in Canada and in North America don't have necessarily a natural resistance to it, like bats that would have been exposed to it before. So some bats do have some resistance to the disease, but unfortunately 90% do or can die from that. They're just like humans. Some bats get sick and don't make it through, and some bats they have their immunity that helps them survive.
Yep. I actually have a quick follow-up on this. You talked about the fact that it's not yet in Alberta, this white nose syndrome, but it's all over North America. Do we have any reason to think why that might be the case? Like, it seems very odd that it wouldn't have come there yet, that we know of.
Well, it's been making its way west through Canada. So it started in New York and then made it into the Maritimes in about between 2011 and 2013. So in Canada, it's been making its way west. I think, well,
just time. Like, there's nothing inherent to the Alberta area that might be sort of blocking it off anyway. Okay. I'm really glad.
Efforts from scientists as well.
Yes, we're really, this is something that every single bat program that we do, no matter who our guest expert is, talks about white nose syndrome. So this is something that's a really, it's a disease that's impacting a group of animals in a way that very few diseases in the history of mankind recording have impacted a group. So it's dire, it's a little scary, but there's a lot of really passionate, dedicated, intelligent people on the case. And, slowly but surely, hopefully we're going to find ways to beat this back and change the tide and have really positive bat conservation stories in the months to come. Marian, I want to take a quick question from our Queen Street crew on StreamYard, and then we're going to go to YouTube for a few. We are whipping through these. This is like the best Q&A of all time. So do bats have sharp teeth, or do they have normal teeth as well? We've got some flat teeth near at the back, our molars. Our front ones have some canines, incisors. They're pretty sharp. Do bats have that diversity too, or is it all little pointy ones?
From what I've seen from the pictures, and I think I showed you one on the PowerPoint as well, they have pretty sharp teeth. Yeah. So some bats eat beetles, and if you've ever picked up a beetle, you know how hard that shell is. So they have to have really pointy, sharp teeth to be able to crunch through that. Yep.
I always think it's a great way of explaining to kids that most mammals, certainly. So mammals are actually the only group with diverse teeth. Reptiles, amphibians, fish, they'll all have one kind of teeth throughout their jaw. We're pretty unique in the fact that we can have different kinds in our mouths, but still our type of teeth relate to the sorts of things we eat. So humans are omnivores. We eat nuts, we eat meat, we eat plants. So you need a diverse tool set to deal with all that. If you're just eating slippery beetles, you need sharp, pointy teeth to grab and then to crush. And so a great question from our Queen Street crew. Miss Fulton's class, so they tried to join us in StreamYard. The tech didn't quite work out for them today, but joining us in Calgary, Alberta, they've got a ton of questions. And so Hudson and Mark, both in grade 1, are curious about the sleeping in caves or sleeping in attics. Is there a reason that they prefer these sorts of dark, secluded habitats to roost in?
That's a very good question. And that's something that I am still looking for the answer for, but I think they do like really closed in spaces, at least for the summer roost. So they like it nice and warm, especially for the females that are giving birth, and attics tend to have those spaces and it's nice and warm for them. And caves for that, my hypothesis for that is it's a constant temperature throughout the winter. Yep. So when you go into the caves, no matter what time of year, when you're deep enough in the cave, it's the same temperature year round. So it's not going to get to -40 like it would outside for when you're hibernating. So when they drop their heart rate and their body temperature, they can keep and maintain that body temperature throughout the winter.
A lot of creatures, when they do go through really harsh winters in a place like Canada, that's pretty much everywhere, they'll try and bury themselves. They'll get in some sheltered area so that you're not exposed to the wind. You don't freeze over. There's some really cool adaptations that bats have that we could talk all day about for withstanding Canadian winters. But I love that question as a kickoff. One more from Miss Fulton's class, because again, they were supposed to be here with us. We'll take a couple more from YouTube, and then we'll go back to Miss Megan's class for our round with our live classes. So Kalia wants to know, what color can bats be, Marian?
Oh, that's a good question. So bats can be so many different colors. I mean, usually we see they're brown, they're black. There's some that are sort of silvery. There's a bat called the silver-haired bat. But bats can be reddish, they can be orangey, they can be even white. So there's a bat called the Honduran white bat that's pure white on their fur, and it's pretty cool. So they can come in all sorts of different beige, brown, black, silver, white, all sorts of colors.
I'm pulling up the name of it so everyone can look this up when you're done the broadcast, because they are such a special, cool bat, the Honduran white bats. They're mind-blowing, so I encourage everyone to check those guys out.
They also roost inside leaves.
They do. Yes, thank you for adding that. I was going to throw that in. Let's head to Miss Gale's class, Charlotte Lake, Ontario. They're grade 1s. They want to know, do bats stay up during the day or only the night? Are they nocturnal, diurnal? What's the deal with bats?
Well, bats are most active during the night. So that's when they go out and they hunt for their food, and they either hunt insects for the bats that live in Canada, or if they're fruit bats, they go and look for nice ripe fruit. They can be pollinators, so they drink nectar, all sorts of things. So they're most active at night. However, if you check out the Palisades Bat Cam, we actually do have a live camera for the roost, the maternity roost that the bats come to in the summer. And you take a look at them during the day, some of them are actually pretty active too. They're basically constantly moving and grooming. They're very clean animals. I don't think I've ever seen any animal groom more than a bat besides cats. And they're crawling all over the place and readjusting and accidentally bopping each other in the nose when they're climbing up to get to their preferred spot. So while they are out and about during the night, during the day, they're not always fast asleep. They are doing other things, but they're mostly resting.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks, Marian. All right, one more question from YouTube. We will take a few more from there in the next little bit. But Miss De Silva's class joining us in Ottawa. So Julie wanted to know, can bats smell? We talked about sight, we talked about hearing. What about smell?
Absolutely, bats can smell. And some, especially the fruit bats, they also need that really strong sense of smell to be able to find the fruit that they're looking for to eat. So the ones in Australia, Oceania, all of those flying foxes, the bats that like to eat fruit, they use their sense of smell a lot.
Yeah, fantastic. You can pretty much assume that a lot of animals, pretty much all animals, have the same senses that we do. Some animals tend to have extra senses that we don't have as people. We're actually pretty sensorially weak other than our vision. We really do have spectacular vision, but otherwise in the animal kingdom, you can be assured most things have some way of taking in chemicals from the world. It's actually one of the more universal senses in the entire animal kingdom. Miss Megan's class, unmute your mic, come on back in and join us, and take us away, grade 2. Hi, guys.
All right. Hold on. Logan's gonna ask.
Hey, Logan.
How long could bats fly in rain?
Yes.
That's a good question.
Or how long can they?
How long can they fly? It depends on the type of bat. So there are so many different kinds of bats, and some fly long distances, some fly shorter distances. They don't tend to go out and fly for too long at a time when they're hunting. They're out for a couple of hours at night. But it really depends on the type of bat. That's a good research question. I think you should. You could propose a research paper on that one.
I think we should. Now, so I can't for the life of me think of the name of the kind of bat, but there are huge flying foxes in West Africa that we know migrate from several thousand kilometers away. So that's the furthest migration I know of for an individual kind of bat. But in one straight go flying, I don't know that offhand. There's some birds that can go multiple years on the wing, which is insane and some really cool stuff. But bats might be a little tricky. Good question, guys. Notre Dame Academy, come on back in Louisville and unmute that mic. You are good to go. Hey, guys. Hi. Oh, you had it unmuted. You muted it again. You pressed it twice. Come back. There we are.
Oh.
Perfect. Hi.
Oh, we can. Say hi, Sadie. You're good.
Hi.
Hi.
Go ahead, Sadie.
Are bats an endangered species? Who are their predators?
Perfect. Great question.
That is a great question. So there are a few bats. There are 3 bats in Canada that are listed as an endangered species. And those are the little brown bat, the northern bat, and the tricolored bat. So those ones are listed as endangered mainly because of how badly their populations have been affected by white nose syndrome. Bat predators have, there's a variety of range of predators of bats. They can be owls can be predators of bats, raccoons can be predators of bats, and even house cats can also be predators of bats. So it's important to keep your cats inside.
We actually talked about this in one of our programs yesterday, the importance of keeping cats inside on a completely unrelated topic. So that actually is a really great conservation thing. And because we have so much time, Marian, I want to share and alarm our children today as we're getting close to Halloween with another predator of bats. In Venezuela, there are centipedes that are about 17 inches long that crawl to the top of the cave, catch bats on the wing and eat them. So those terrifying little fast things in your house, there are really big versions of those in other countries that can eat bats as well. That's your living nightmare for the rest of the broadcast, everybody. Grade 3 Queen Street crew shared a great question in the chat, and I love this. So they're differentiating. Do bats have a good sense of hearing, or do they only use echolocation? Is this one and the same thing? Are they two different senses? If a bat's just passively listening, does it have a good sense of hearing that way as well?
Well, they do have to have a really good sense of hearing to be able to hear the echoes that bounce off those objects. So they do have a pretty good sense of hearing. And they can actually emit frequencies that are too high for humans to hear. So they have better hearing than we do. Although there are a couple of species of bats that do have some echolocations at a low enough frequency that some humans are able to hear it, mostly kids, because lucky you have better hearing than grown-ups. And also, when they're not echolocating, they actually chitter at a volume that people can hear. So all of those little squeaks that you heard in my video, all of the little those are actually recordings of one of the bats from the Palisades Center. So they talk to each other, they chat, and baby bats, when they're learning to communicate, they babble just like human babies.
How cool is that? I really hope all our students get the chance to hear bats. If you go out at night in most places, or certainly a significant number of places in North America, you will see bats in any rural area, even urban centers. I know a friend of mine is a major bat researcher in the heart of downtown Toronto. So pretty much anywhere you can go where there's a place for them to roost, you will find bat species. And if you get the chance to hear them, it's a really special experience. Mr. Boggs' class, please do unmute your mic. I'll come to you guys in just a second, but let's head to our Eagleswood grade 4s first in New Jersey. Come on back in, guys. Hey.
All right, Evelyn, you can try your question.
Hey, Evelyn.
Do we have any bats in New Jersey?
Any bats in New Jersey, Marian?
Absolutely, 100%. You have bats in New Jersey. There are bats all over the world. The only place you won't find bats is Antarctica. So you definitely have bats in New Jersey. What types of bats? I'm not sure. I know a lot more about the bats that can be found in Alberta because that's where I live. But I bet you could look it up. You could check out if you've got a local fish and wildlife officer in the area, you can ask that and check it out.
I was all set to go to Antarctica too, but if there are no bats there, what's the point? I mean, geez, it's just ice. I do want to note for all our classes, actually, my favorite way of finding out local species is for older kids, the iNaturalist, for younger kids, the Seek app. So these are sort of one and the same spin-offs of one another. But if you get these apps, they're entirely free. You can learn about all the local species that live near you. In fact, you can type in New Jersey and bats and see not only all the kinds of bats that live in the area close to home, but exactly where they were found in case you want to go looking for any of your own. So really, really helpful tools for that. Let's head to our Kitchener crew, Mr. Boggs group, and then we'll head to our Connecticut crew to wrap up alongside some YouTube questions. Mr. Boggs group, come on in. Hey, guys.
Say hi. Are bats related to sugar gliders and flying squirrels?
Good question.
That is a very good question. So they are in the sense that they're both mammals, but bats are their own order called Chiroptera, meaning hand wing. So the theory for the evolution of bats is that way back, there may have been some common ancestor there, but since then they've diverged.
To my knowledge, if I'm not mistaken, their closest relatives are the shrews, or has that been? I know bat evolution is like one of those things that people fight over still. Like people are really seem to be unsure about where bats quite fall. But that's
exactly. Even within that division that they used to have. So they used to be divided into mega Chiroptera and micro Chiroptera. So big bats and little bats. And even that is being debated now. So biology is fun, everybody. It's so much fun.
You've hit upon one of the longest running feuds in science with this question. Like literally scientists will yell at each other about where they think bats are in the evolutionary tree. Most creatures are pretty well established. Bats tend to get people going a little bit. So good question, guys. Ms. Bergeron, Ms. Erickson's class, we're going to come to you guys, take a couple from YouTube, and then we will make sure you guys have the resources to keep the learning going long after the broadcast is done. So Connecticut, come on back in. Hey, guys.
How big can bats get?
How big can they get?
How big they can get.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. So the biggest bat in the world is the golden crowned flying fox. and its wingspan can be 6 feet. So that's taller than me. I'm only 5'2". I'm very small, but that's as big as the bats. That's the biggest bat. The smallest one is called Kitty's hognose bat, or the bumblebee bat, and it's only about the size of my thumb, or even smaller. That's why it's called the bumblebee bat.
I had never heard that those are one and the same creature before. That's fascinating. There you go. Learn something new every day. A couple quick, actually, we're at the 40-minute mark, so I will take the couple quick questions from YouTube in a minute, but I want to note that there is an opportunity to share more questions after this broadcast is done. So if you didn't get your bat questions answered and you want to inundate Marian with questions, head to our Padlet link. So this is a virtual whiteboard. You can write your questions there, get all those answers, and we'll leave that up for a couple days. If you guys want to get your bat questions in after the broadcast, please head there. All right, 2 more from YouTube, folks, and then we'll wrap up from there. Miss Taylor's class wants to know, do all bats hibernate? Great question.
That's a fantastic question. No, not all bats hibernate. Some bats in Alberta specifically are migratory, and then it is possible that they also hibernate once they've traveled. But as I said, scientists and researchers are still finding out so much more about bats all the time. So not all bats are hibernators.
Awesome. All right. And then Mr. Tanner's class wants to know, do bats carry their babies when they're flying? So do you ever have bats like on the mom as she's going along with a bunch of little ones, or not?
Yes, they do. It's fantastic. Bats will carry their babies when they're flying. So the babies will just cling on tightly to mom as she's flying around. Although some bats, the young can start flying as early as about a month to a couple of months old. They're also about a third of the size of the mom when they're born, so they're big babies.
Very, very big babies. Marian, this has been truly spectacular. I want to make sure our classes have a bunch of resources before I ask you one final question. So first and foremost, again, if you want to share any more questions, padlet.com/ourinitials/bat. We'll make sure all our registered classes have that link. This program is part of our Peak Discovery series, one of our signature events every single year. So thank you for coming out in huge numbers to join us today, and check out all the upcoming broadcasts soon and some of our past programs with Marian and crew there. pc.dc.ca is the very easy URL for the Parks Canada website if you want to learn more about all the amazing stuff they do across Canada. And my favorite bat organization is Bat Conservation International, batcon.org. If you want to learn how to make a bat box, if you want to learn about bat statuses around the globe, they are a really spectacular way to do that. Marian, before we wrap up, is there a final message about the bats in Jasper, in your office, or more that you want to share with all our kids today?
I just want to say that, keep an open mind when you're learning about new species. Share your knowledge with friends and family. Do what you can to protect the bats in your backyard and to learn about the local bats in your area. And happy Bat Week.
Happy Bat Week, everybody, and happy Halloween coming up soon. What a fitting program to kick off our week lead up to that. And Marian, as you know well, what we do to end up every broadcast, I'm going to bring in all our teachers to say a big thank you and farewell. So Miss Megan's crew, Notre Dame Academy, Mr. Boggs, Eagleswood, and Mr. Crummell.